this evening. I'm somewhat humbled by your amazing publicity and the build-up that you've given me, so thank you for that. Just a quick word on this title, Director of Creative, just to be really clear, as was probably apparent from Liz's intro. I'm actually a suit. I'm director of a creative business unit at our company. I ran through it properly at about 11 this morning and realised it ran to about 90 minutes, which we haven't got this evening. So I think what we've agreed is that we're going to try and keep it to an hour and 15, and the last half hour of which will be my last section, which is sharing with you a few tips on how to get into our industry and, importantly, answering all your questions. So I'm going to try and cram the rest of it into about 45 minutes, which will mean there's some creative work in here that I will skip over, but I think what we'll do is try and get the director's cut on your network, and that'll have all the links to the various movie files. I hope I'm going to be bringing you stuff this evening that you haven't seen, but given the illustrious nature of this film and TV studies programme here at Nottingham, I'm pretty sure that you're all pretty clued in and have probably seen all of it. So there are going to be 4 sections basically. I'm just going to say a couple of things quickly about our company Red Bee, and this short 2-minute compilation will just give you just a feel for the kind of work we do in our company. A bit of a taste of what we do at Red Bee. We're a bit of a unique company. Just think of us a little bit like an advertising agency that specialises in creating and promoting media brands. As you can see, we do a huge amount of work for the BBC, and we work with media companies all over the world creating brands. So, for example, we promote virtually everything that the BBC runs across all its channels, big dramas like Luther, pretty much everything you see between the programmes. We create channel brands. I know this is a brand that's very popular in this student community. We invented the TV channel called Dave and made it famous. We work all over the world, and although this isn't our most creative recent piece of work, it's one that we're really proud of because we've been working with a company called CBC in post-revolutionary Egypt, building a TV channel and a brand identity out of the Arab Spring and creating or helping doing our bit to create the media culture in Egypt. And more recently, we are increasingly working with brands outside the broadcasting sector. This looks a bit fuzzy on the screen actually, but is it okay at the back? It's an example of a new online TV channel that Waitrose have launched that we helped them to build and create. So now I could spend 3 hours here this evening showing off and showing our work, but you wouldn't thank me for that. It's very difficult to choose one piece of work because we produce something like 5,000 pieces of work a year. But I thought I'd show this one example, and I'll probably cut it off halfway through, but it's not the most recent, and as you'll see from, well, that's just a few pictures of Red Bee. As you see from the date, this is not the most recent piece of work, but it is relevant to the theme I want to pick up this evening. And it's just a piece of work we're really proud of for a show that you all know and love. So I'll just play this. This is for the 25th anniversary of EastEnders. It really captures so many things that we do, because one of the themes I'm going to be talking about this evening is multi-platform content. So it's no longer just about a trailer on a linear TV channel. It's about how you use social media, how you harness the power of PR, how you use program content, original content, and the ultimate goal is obviously that it travels into popular culture, and actually Harry Hill taking the piss out of it is fine because it's just spreading awareness of that whole thing. So what I was hoping to talk about this evening is what's happening in our industry, and then for the last half hour, 10 tips to help you get in. I'm making a big assumption that most people here are studying film and TV and have an ambition to work in our industry in some form. So I'll share with you whatever wisdom I can muster on that. So taking the first one of those, what's happening in our industry first, and I'm going to divide this between TV programs, TV content, and importantly talk about what brands outside the broadcasting sector are increasingly doing, which I think is one of the most dynamic and interesting things happening in the industry right now. And talking about TV first, and I promise this is the only semi-academic slide in this whole presentation, but I know Kathy Johnson teaches this as part of one of your modules. So transmedia storytelling or multi-platform content. Some people get quite rigid in their definition of what transmedia storytelling is. For me, every single example is different, and so you shouldn't get too hung up on the definition. But fundamentally, what we're talking about here, a driving force in our industry, is people no longer just making a program, but thinking about how do we make this a transmedia experience? How do we harness social media? How do we use different platforms? How do we continue the narrative through all these different means of communication? And almost the biggest tip for you this evening would be, if you know this stuff, you're going to be at a huge advantage over any other young people trying to get into our industry, because it's the biggest single thing. And people of my generation are struggling to catch up, quite frankly. I mean, we try our best, but you're the guys who are on Twitter, on Facebook, using social media, understanding how new on-demand online platforms work. So, talking about transmedia storytelling, there are a couple of really legendary case studies, and I'm sure you all know these, so I'm not going to waste time this evening talking about them, but probably the most famous is for the launch of Batman: The Dark Knight. Do you know that one? So that was an alternate reality game, and because that movie was about 3 years old, I'm not going to show it, but if you want to, when we post this, Liz, we'll put all the links online for you, so you can, there's loads of stuff online about this particular case study. Another recent, or not recent, but good example is season 5 of Dexter in the US, where again they created an alternate reality game, invented this character called the Serial Huntress. So if you Google Serial Huntress, or if you put it into YouTube, then there's some really interesting content there where she's inviting you to solve a homicide, and then there are clues you have to follow up in a game that you play. But more recently, I just was going to share with you a few examples. So this one, again, apologies if this is really washed out on the screen, but who knows the show Psych? Just a few hands. So Psych is a comedy drama from USA Network. It features these two characters, Sean, this guy here, and Gus. So Sean is the son of I think a police detective. So he was brought up with the ability to, he's got superior observational powers, but the LAPD think he's psychic. That's the conceit in the show. Popular show in the US. The thing about a show like this is it's half an hour, and it will run, say, on a Wednesday at 9:30, and that's the beginning and the end of the show. So even if you're a big fan, that's when you'll see it. What they did with the last series was they created an online game and invented a character called the #Killer. And if you went, has anybody played this or seen it? Anyone at all? So it's all online, so you can go and have a look. This is a live site. So they invited viewers to play the game. Now, what they did as part of that was to create original content shot on the set with the actors, using exactly the same production values as they would for the main show. But this is probably one of the ones I'll drop in view of time, because actually this isn't the best example of, it's actually a bit boring, the clip, but it's worth going online to see how they set up the premise. Because basically, Sean sends a message out on Twitter, and he gets a reply from this mysterious character called the #Killer. And then what happens is, over the course of a few weeks, they go from city to city in the US, and they kill a real viewer in every city. And it's a really immersive game. And I think what's interesting is, if you look at
this? Go ahead.
I'm not going to play this, but it's on YouTube. But if you look at what they've managed to achieve, they claim, so these are just a couple of screen grabs from #Killer, but they're claiming 128 million page views, 350,000 unique visitors. That's a lot. But more importantly, visitors are spending 15 minutes per visit. Think about how long you'd spend on a TV website. What this means is people are getting into the game and they're coming back. 60% of users returned more than 5 times, and 455,000 Facebook shares with 59 million friends. So it was hugely successful for Psych in just extending the narrative. It's a really good example of transmedia storytelling. And this is just a quote from the VP of USA, who basically says it was fantastic, but he would say that. But it was a hugely successful venture on the part of USA. Closer to home, I will play you this case study video because I think it tells the story better than I could. I don't know if anybody knows Huge Fish Fight. Anyone? Just a few hands. So this is obviously a show on Channel 4. It's a documentary and it's about the fishing industry. But it turned into a multi-platform campaign to correct some of the wrongs that were happening in the EU around fishing. So I'll just play this movie file and it will tell the story. Story. I love the bit where Hugh Fernie-Whittingstall was saying, I'm going to tweet and Facebook and viral, but joking apart, the power of what they've been able to do there is extraordinary. And if you think about making a documentary on that subject even 10 years ago, if you were at Channel 4 or this production company, Keo, you could probably have made a very elegant, beautifully crafted documentary telling the story. You might have got a few letters to MPs, but there was no such thing as YouTube or Twitter or any of the online platforms that we now have. And what they were able to mobilise was, for me, if you want to be a documentary maker, and that's where you see your career going, it's never been more exciting. It's never been a more exciting time because you've got so many tools at your disposal. And again, this is the MD of Keo basically saying the impact wouldn't have been half as good without a digital element. They've even got their own digital team at this production company. And I won't show you movie files for this, but this is another good example from Channel 4. So Channel 4 have got a budget of about 12 million a year for multi-platform content, which is a lot of money. Again, maybe it's just me. Is it very faded and blurred at the back? So I've obviously ripped most of this off Snaps Pro, off websites, but Embarrassing Bodies is a show. Who knows Embarrassing Bodies? So there's an element of, it's factual entertainment, it's a bit sniggery, it's quite funny, they've got quite over-the-top presenters. But what you may not know is they have a very serious health checker app online, which is also an iTunes app, available in the iTunes store, which has achieved huge numbers of downloads. And what they managed to do was actually sign a contract with the NHS in the West Midlands for them to use the app on their own website, so the NHS Local. So think about, again, the power of these platforms and extending the narrative of basically a TV factual entertainment show. I haven't got a movie file for this, but if you want to go and Google it, this is an example of how a show went into the real world and used new forms of media to extend the narrative. So this is Hollyoaks. A few months back, one of the characters, I don't know, Hollyoaks fans would know this, so correct me, I don't know the name of the character, but went and invaded, in theory, a Wretch 32 gig, went on stage and sang a song of love to his girlfriend he was trying to win back, and was then bundled off stage by the security guards. And that then appeared as a segment in an episode of Hollyoaks the following week. So it shows how people are beginning to think outside, think about how you can use actual live experiences as part of TV narrative. Now, one other example of Red Bee work I want to show illustrates another phenomenon that's developing, and in fact to the point that Liz is doing some original research here at the University of Nottingham with our help on the whole phenomenon of second screening. This is a relatively new thing, and again it's something that I'd strongly advise you to know all about, because it will give you an edge when you start going out there and getting jobs in television. So increasingly, I'm sure you're aware that there are more and more apps available for you to use as companions when you're watching linear TV shows. So a really good one is the £1 Million Drop on Channel 4, for example. And you can see how that works, because that's a game show. It's got natural format points all the way through, and you can easily see how you can play along. But with a drama, think about it, it's a bit harder, because why would a drama producer want you to be using an iPad or an iPhone while you're watching the drama? But we were briefed by Fox International to create a second screen app for season 2 of The Walking Dead. Who knows The Walking Dead? Wow, it's a really popular show in this audience. It's the most number of hands so far. So, as those of you who watch it, which is most of you, will know, it's a zombie drama, which you'd think would be a bit tacky, but actually has got A-list talent like Andrew Lincoln, and it's actually a very well-made drama. But the thing that the fans all love is the zombie kills. That is the thing they keep coming back to the show for. So what we did was to create a second screen app using completely new innovative technology. And again, this is a case study video that tells the story, so I'll just play the video. Sorry, I forgot to give the parental guidance warning before that, so sorry for anyone who was squeamish, I apologise. Again, in view of time, I won't show this, but I will just quickly talk about it. Who knows the Lizzie Bennett diaries? That's good. I was wondering actually, because I thought either all the hands would shoot up or maybe no one, but so the Lizzie Bennett diaries is not a TV programme, it is an online vlog, I suppose you'd call it. So it's a series of short videos featuring this character here, Lizzie Bennett, and it's essentially Pride and Prejudice, done LA style. I assume it's LA, and it's all shot in Lizzie's bedroom fundamentally. So she introduces you to herself and her two sisters, Lydia, who's the younger, annoying sister, and Jane, who's the older, mature sister. So it follows the plot of Pride and Prejudice almost exactly, with the marriages and babies and all of that stuff. But
my name is Lizzie Bennett.
It's really, really worth having a look at. It's just interesting. I don't know if it's good or not, but it's interesting, and you should definitely look at it, because it's an example of how. I'm going to come back to this, because this is people making content. They're not going to Fox, they're not going to AMC or USA Network to get this distributed. They're doing it for themselves, and they're creating. So that's the Lizzie Bennett Diaries website with the short videos on, and then you can go to Lizzie's Facebook page, her Twitter feed, and then Lydia, the younger sister. This is what you see on Tumblr for Lydia, and this is what you see for Jane. So, and then there are layers upon layer upon layer upon layer of interest in terms of the narrative. So just have a look at it. It's a really, really interesting case study. And then finally, I was going to quickly talk about the movie Limitless, but in view of time, it'll be on the director's cut. But it's just interesting marketing where, if you know the movie, they basically marketed it as if it were a real drug, using all the characteristics of traditional drug marketing. This is a tube card in the London Underground, and the website, and a commercial is a trailer for the movie, but go on YouTube and watch it. So I'm going to race now and talk about brands, because we've talked about TV programs and related content, but one of the really interesting things that's happening in our industry, and I came from advertising, and I think one of the things I'd encourage you to think about is there's a blurring now between advertising and TV production. So don't be too rigid in your understanding of how our world works, because it may well be over your career, it may take different twists and turns that you don't expect at the moment. So if you're absolutely sure you want to make documentaries, or you want to go to Hollywood to make comedy dramas, brilliant, go for it. I wouldn't discourage you. But there are lots of other ways you can get involved, and what's interesting is the way that brands are changing the way they're doing their marketing and increasingly investing in new forms of content. Now, what we say at Red Bee is we're TV people, but also brand people, because we almost straddle those two worlds. And I don't know if you've seen these phrases. It's a little bit of a cliche in advertising right now, but the phrases of bought media, owned media, and earned media. Anyone familiar with that troika of jargon? Probably just as well. But so basically what it's saying is, for 50 years, advertising has been bought media. What do I mean by that? I mean, somebody makes a TV commercial or makes a press ad and buys the space. So you run it in one of the breaks, one of the junctions in the X Factor, or you run it in the Daily Mail. What's now happening, and it's totally fueled by technology, is that brands can own their own media. Now, in some ways, this is not a new phenomenon. You must all know, I'm sure you know, the origin of the term soap opera. Nods. So the reason that soap operas are called soap operas are because back in the early days of television, in the early 50s, big detergent companies like Procter & Gamble made programs, and they made a serial drama like EastEnders now, where you basically have no end, they just go on and on and on. And they made them, and they funded them entirely as vehicles for them to run their advertising in. And this is an example from 1953. What's happening now, and you don't need me to stand here and tell you this, but because of technology, video is becoming ubiquitous. And Cisco, who know a thing or two about this stuff, say that by 2014, more than 90% of the world's data will be video. And so what that means is audiences demand to be entertained, informed and educated 24/7. So for example, one stat is 28% of people check Facebook before getting out of bed, apparently. I'm sure no one in this room would ever do that, but apparently 28% of people do. And it tells you something about what's happening in the industry. Because for brands, this means being always on, because the media is now always on. And brands actually are now media owners, so they need to be always on across multiple platforms. And if you think about brands being always on, where does your eye on this screen get drawn most naturally? I'm leading the witness, but to the video content. So it's video that is going to be most engaging for brands. And so what we say to our clients is that brands, and that Bacardi example is actually Red Bee Works, so we're working with Bacardi Global Brands to create video content for them. But we say, don't think about consumers, because the language of marketing forever has been about consumers, but think about audiences, and that fundamentally changes the way that you think about the work you do, because an audience needs content that they will find engaging, entertaining, happy, sad, dramatic, whatever. Now, I'm going to show you, and it'll have to be quite quick, otherwise Liz will give me a big sign, but I'm just going to quickly whiz through a few examples, and loads of these you should follow up on YouTube or go to their websites or find out what's being written about them. A really brilliant example is, well, first of all, the people who are doing this best now and are the leading edge innovators are fashion brands. And amongst those fashion brands, probably the best out there is Burberry. Burberry is an amazing organisation that has been fundamentally transformed by its current management. I just took this screen grab from their current seasonal website. This is the homepage, and look, it looks and feels like a TV channel. And if you go to Burberry.com, you'll see things like, for example, Burberry Acoustic, which is a series of elegantly shot videos of mostly relatively unknown British bands, but in this case, Keane are playing on the Great Wall of China. But they're all acoustic tracks, and they're all wearing Burberry kit, but it's not a heavy sell. But it's very, very well produced, beautifully packaged stuff. And I won't play this. This is just the CEO of Burberry talking about how they're transforming their organisation into a digital media company. It's a fashion brand that 10 years ago was associated with chavs in check caps. They've fundamentally transformed what this brand is. And now, has anyone been to their flagship store in Regent Street? This is their store in Regent Street, London, which opened a few months ago. It is an amazing multimedia experience. It's got something like 100 screens. This screen here, you can see, is about 3 stories high. It's one of the biggest retail video screens in the world. They are an amazing company doing amazing things, so you should really have a look at what Burberry are doing. Equally, have a look at ASOS. There's no movie file for this because what they do is so complex. They have shoppable video content. So if you go onto ASOS.com, they have a lot of video content where you can click and immediately see what the outfit is, what the garment is, and then click through to buy. And this is their latest, I assume this is a seasonal pre-Christmas or autumn fashion campaign. It's called #BestNightEver. So if you want to go on Twitter, have a look at that. But it's featuring people like Ellie Goulding and Azalea Banks, and it's really amazing, but go and have a look at that. And I was going to play you, if you write down only.com, only.com, this is a case
for the law.
Sorry, I forgot to put the link in. This is actually a Danish company, and it's a case study, but you really would, I'd have to play the whole thing for you to really understand it, and I just don't think I've got time. Otherwise we're going to get kicked out. So, but what they've done is similar to some of the stuff ASOS has done, but this one, a Cannes Lion, which in our industry is the gold standard of great work. So just have a look. It's really, really interesting stuff. Another one that you should go and look at in your own time is Old Spice. You know the Old Spice case study? You do, everyone's nodding. You've all seen it? Yeah. Okay, you don't need me to show it tonight. So it is a couple of years old, but again, it's very, very innovative, and the way they've used YouTube and taken individual comments from Twitter and then turn those into tailored videos on YouTube. It's just really interesting. And
Old Spice practical.
And Old Spice is Procter & Gamble. You know, it's one of the big bad detergent global conglomerates, the people who used to fund the early soap operas. So the fact that they're now getting this stuff is really interesting. But what I do want to spend a bit of time talking about is Chipotle. Because for me, and I've blogged about this, if you go to redbymedia.com blog, then there's a blog that I wrote, because this won the Grand Prix at Cannes this year. And I just think it's an amazing case study. So again, there's a case study video, so I think the easiest thing for me to do is play the video, because it tells the story better than I could. So the other really interesting thing for me about that is the people who made that were not who you'd expect. So they were actually, it's a company called CAA, they're the Creative Artists Agency. Now this is a talent agency. I'm sure Paul's written books about them. And they're a Hollywood talent agency. They represent, you know, big Hollywood stars. And what that says is that new companies are getting involved in this kind of world. So when you think about the kinds of companies that you might want to go and work for, it isn't necessarily the big independent production companies, the big broadcasters, the big ad agencies. It could be new types of company that are beginning to be really innovative in this space. Okay. I haven't got time to talk about Volvo, but just briefly, I was going to show, and on the director's cut will be, comparing and contrasting what Volvo did when they launched a new range of trucks earlier this year with, if I can put this on mute, actually, it might be easy. Oh yeah, here we go. So basically, this was a very boring demo film that they ran for this new range of trucks, and this is talking about how its handling is amazing. It handles like a car, basically. And that got 112,000 views on YouTube the last time I looked. But what they also did was they then created this amazing stunt involving two trucks travelling on a road in Croatia in parallel at speed with a slack line between them, and the world champion slack liner, who's like a tightrope walker who walks on a slack rope. She's a lady from the US, and she walked between the trucks as they were speeding between these two tunnels, and she had to get across from one truck to the other before the trucks hit the tunnel. And this is the film that is on their website and on YouTube, and it's about 3 minutes long, so we can't show it all now, but it's really worth looking at. And this it's absolutely gripping content. It's brilliantly, brilliantly done. And it's for a truck. And it got 6.5 million views on YouTube. So this is all changing. This is the new marketing. It's really, really exciting. So if you want to be somebody who makes exciting action programs, maybe you can be making them for Volvo, not necessarily for Sky. Compare and contrast, again, I won't play this, but this is the latest Mercedes advertising campaign done by their big, lazy, fat, overpaid ad agency. And they tried to create a social media phenomenon, and it really was an epic fail. Has anyone seen this? Do you drive? Am I wrong? Do you think it's good? No? Well, it got really slagged off on Twitter. In fact, what was interesting is hardly anyone talked about it on Twitter, which almost in a way, indifference is almost worse than people actually being violently against it, because at least then you're provoking a reaction. So people saying, including a hashtag in a fairly rubbish TV ad is a recipe for disaster. So, you know, people have to be really careful about this stuff. Have a look at Call of Duty Black Ops 2, just launched. What's really interesting about this is, again, it would be another whole hour, Liz, to talk about gaming. We haven't got the hour, I wish we had. But look at the gaming market. And this isn't a market I know anything about, but when they launched Black Ops 2, they commissioned a live-action trailer shot by Guy Ritchie. So this is a live-action trailer for a video game. Really interesting stuff, and it's very, very well produced, high production quality. Have a look at that. I haven't even got time to talk about this, which is a shame, but never mind. But I do want to show this because I think it illustrates. I'm nearly at the end, and we'll get to the questions. But who knows Antoine Dodson? Can anybody tell me who he was? Yeah, anybody else know that? So basically, this is a kind of internet sensation, but I'm showing it not just to have a cheap laugh at Antoine Dodson's expense, but there is a serious point to this. So basically, in Huntsville, Alabama, a while back, it's actually quite a troubling story. So in the project in Huntsville, Alabama, during the night, an intruder broke in through an upstairs window and tried to rape a woman who was asleep in bed. Her brother, Antoine Dodson, came and basically attacked the would-be rapist and chased him away. The news crew went to the project and filmed the two victims, or Antoine, talking. And the clip from the news broadcast went viral and was picked up. It went sort of globally viral within a few hours. So this is the clip of the news broadcast. Oh, get the idea. You should go and watch the whole thing, because for me it's got a great payoff line, but it's so interesting for me because it started news broadcast, Gregory Brothers pick it up, goes viral, iTunes, big global, or certainly in the US, big hit. A few months later, the New York Times and Intel are funding the Gregory Brothers to make that. It's just, for me, it's such a perfect encapsulation of what's happening. It's all changing. It's the Wild West out there in our industry. The final one I won't show, because we need to get on to the questions, is probably the most genius example of all, actually, which is Red Bull. These are this is the master class in content marketing. And when this guy, Felix Baumgartner, jumped out of the capsule and broke the world record for the highest skydive and broke the speed of sound, it was watched by, and this is the movie file again, go online if you haven't seen it. It's amazing, it's amazing. But it was watched live by over 8 million people. Now, to give you a sense, and that was globally, admittedly, but the X Factor last week was watched by 7.7 million people. And if they're going to do things on the X Factor like vote out Ella Henderson, and more people are going to watch Red Bull sending a man up into space to jump out of a capsule, and they don't need to spend money. They're making the content. It's just like soap operas all those years ago. So, and nearly 30 million people watched that in total. 30 million people. That's what Red Bull can do. That was going to be a comedy moment from 2012. Haven't got time, but I'll send you the link because you should watch it.
The legacy of the...
That's the end of the first section, so I promise we've now got how long?
We've got about a quarter of an hour before we have to be out, I'm afraid.
I thought it was
we've been asked to get out at 10 past.
Okay,
sorry.
that's a real shame. Okay, well, if anyone's got any really burning questions, we can always move outside. But so 10 tips to help you get in. So the first thing is, and most of these things you already know. So I'm not going to be standing here sharing some amazing revelation. You already know it, but I can give you my take on it and give you a sense of, if you like, a contemporary context. So the first thing is gain diverse experience. I just want to show you a quick clip from Girls, which is, anybody seen Girls on Sky Atlantic? Brilliant show. So this is, for those of you who don't know the show, this is Hannah, who is played by the writer Lena Dunham, and she's an intern at a publisher's in New York. Useful to ask some of our youngest, newest trainees, runners, some of the people who work at Red Bee. I just asked them, how did you get in and what sorts of things did you do? And I'm just going to share a few of those. So this is one girl who said, I did 2 weeks work experience in the Harry Potter art department through a friend. I did a day at the London Fashion Week dressing catwalk models. Then eventually I got a 6-month internship at RDF, which is one of the big production companies. And she said, if I could do it all again, I'd get experience earlier while at uni. So her message was, don't wait till you graduate. Be doing it now. I'm sure some of you are. Another one said, pre-uni, I did work experience at news companies, and she said, that showed me a side of the industry I didn't want to work in, which is also really valuable. Find out what you don't like doing by doing it. She then got a job as a production intern at Disney, and she said, get fully involved with everything. even if it's not exactly what you want to do. So be broad-minded about it. Another one said she didn't go to uni, she worked part-time as an assistant to a technical manager on phoning shows, and then after a lot of persistence she got a break as a runner on shows like The X Factor. There are a few more, we'll put them on the presentation online. So, but I think that's just a really important point. And then the related point is learn craft skills. So if you've got access here at the university to learn even basic editing, for example, so learn Final Cut Pro or basic Avid editing, then I'd encourage you to do that. You may not want to be an editor, but it gives you a skill that you can then go and take when you start to knock down doors and try to get experience. And make yourself useful. So the serious point in the girls' clip is that the girl who got the job learned Photoshop. And it's just one of those things, if people walk into Red Bee and they can do keynotes and they can put a presentation like this together, it's fantastically valuable to us, rather than someone saying, I just want to get a job as an intern. The fourth would be, I think, learn from the best. So go and work for the very best companies you can for free, initially, if you have to, because what's on your CV, you know, if it's a big production company like Endemol, or if it's the BBC or Channel 4, it just means more. Have ideas, so don't just try to think about what you can personally bring to it. So the people who created the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, for example, had the idea and made it happen. The Gregory brothers make things, actually get out there and do stuff. And it doesn't have to be a multi-million-dollar production budget. You can take a news broadcast and auto-tune it and look what happens. I've talked about this. This is really important. You need to be the experts in this stuff. And you need to be the experts in second screens. And you need to look beyond the UK, particularly to the US. So much of the exciting stuff is happening in the US market, but also Denmark. I was going to show you something from Belgium. There's really cool stuff happening in Japan, China. It's not just the UK. And finally, I'd leave you with the thought of think big, because you know your students at you've got the finest school of film and TV studies in the country, probably the world. You know, you've got, you know, you worked really hard to get here, and you know, you're being taught by brilliant people. You know, have big ambition, because the people who made some of this stuff were in the position that you're in a few years ago, so it can happen. So, sorry Liz, I know you're giving me that look. So that was my question time slide.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Andy. I think silver screen and knocking on the door, but we've negotiated until 10 past, is that right? So we do have time for a couple of questions, not very many, I'm afraid, but if you have burning questions for Andy, we will move outside and hopefully give you a chance to ask him. So does anyone have any one question that can kick us off for a very brief Q&A session? Yeah.
Did you go to university? Did you study? It was a million years ago, but I went to Manchester and I did a course called European Studies, which was half French in my case and half economic history, economics, contemporary European history, and then got a job in an ad agency as a grad trainee. You know what, there weren't really film and TV studies degrees back in those days. There was barely even TV. But yeah, you know, I think people who get into the industry don't necessarily study film or TV.
I myself study English. So.
Right, well, brilliant. Well, you know, it's great that you're here. So I think, you know, it's one of those industries where there really are no set rules. I mean, studying film and TV clearly gives people an advantage in terms of learning the stuff. But once you're out there looking for jobs, then, you know, it's a level playing field, really, realistically. Right.
Yeah.
After you get some work experience or internship, how do you maintain contacts? Because people always tell me it's who you know, not what you know. But how do you keep that?
Well, you know, there's no real secret to it. I think you have to be persistent. You have to be charming, as I'm sure you are. I'm serious. You have to be. You know, people have to like you. You know, if you're in. Honestly, we have people who come for work experience who are fantastic. They light the place up. They're full of energy. They've got ideas. They're nice people. They're funny. They're all of those things. The other people just you know, just slouch around and don't contribute. So, you know, then it's about getting to know. So everywhere you work, even if it's for free, there'll be other people in your situation. There'll be people who are maybe 2 years ahead of you. Talk to them, ask them, how did you get in? Go for a drink with them, stay in touch. LinkedIn, you should all be on LinkedIn. You should all be on Twitter. Even if you're not actively tweeting, be on Twitter, follow people. You know, just be persistent and just try to maintain that network. Because you are right, it is about who you know so much of the time. But you can make that work in your favour. And all the people that I talked to at Red Bee, it's funny how their journeys were. They did something that then led to something they didn't expect to do, and then they went on in a different path, and then they met someone who said, oh, I know someone who's looking for a runner, and then they went to do that, and then they didn't like it, but then they met someone else. That's the way it works. So you won't automatically go straight to the thing you want to do, but be happy with that, and think, well, what am I learning in this environment? Who else? At the back? It's a great question. We do a large amount in-house where it's basic. So if you go back to EastEnders, some of that EastEnders work was done using clips from the programmes, old shows. All of that production we do in-house. All of our design work, pretty much, we do in-house. But with a big production where we have to go and film on location or animation, we'll then work with third parties to do that. So it just depends on the project. Okay, who else? So Liz told me there'd be loads of questions. You're all
I think you might be conscious that the time's about to get cut off. Yeah.
Oh, so when you're working in the industry, do you have to stick to your role, or do you, like within, let's say, Red Bee, you'd be doing one thing and then maybe one day you'd be editing or something else, or you kind of fix?
It kind of depends on the role, but it's quite fluid. It's quite fluid. I mean, we have people who've started as team assistants. So in the old days would be called secretaries, but they're not really secretaries because everyone does their own. They do everything themselves on their Macs or their PCs, but they're team assistants and they'll just do whatever's needed, and that's the way to just get a varied experience, and then you can then start to move into the area that you want to move into. So, yeah.
Okay, I think we...
One
Oh,
more
there is
about
one
that.
question.
Definitely, I'd encourage you to do that. Yeah, I would. You know, you might find 9 out of 10 companies don't look at it, or you know, you have to be persistent. But it definitely would help. It depends what you want to do. I mean, what do you want to do, creatively or production or? Right. Well, I think anything you can do. One of the quotes on here, actually, it's from one of our creators, but she did say, "Have your own website." And that might sound, well, why would I want my own website? But actually, you can just put an elegant, simple website together using free tools you can download, and then blog or put stuff on it. It doesn't have to be amazing qualities. It just has to be nicely thought through. Have a point of view. And then that why do I say that? Because it makes you different from everybody else that comes along. So, one last one.
I can
No?
see people staring in at the door, I'm afraid.
All right, well,
we will sort of hang around outside for a couple of minutes in case any questions. But thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you, Andy.